Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler. I am your host on our little half an hour journey here today. I am also the owner of a thing called the Sechler Law Firm, where we do estate planning and elder law work for the Pittsburgh region. We have our primary office up in Cranberry Township, right? Lots of wills, lots of trusts, helping people just plan out their affairs. We also do a lot of nursing home work for people in a nursing home. If you're not familiar, nursing homes are pretty darn expensive, and we help people to protect their savings and their home and things from those expenses. And that's a passion of mine. And we like to teach people about it. So if you have not checked us out, if you've not heard what we're all about, we like to do the education piece of this for free. My personal belief is that educated decisions are typically better decisions, and I don't think lawyers should be charging for the education piece. That's why we do this radio show. That's why we do our free workshops all around town. And you should check out the free workshops. We do a series of them in a row to make sure that you have all the decisions. And our sort of guarantee to you is that you will make a well-informed decision. You're gonna know your options by the time you're done working with my law firm. So I think people come to law firms and they're all types of confused, right? People call us and say, "I need a will." Well, do you? Yeah, you probably do, but maybe there's some other tools that we ought to take a look at as well. And so we invite you to a free workshop where we talk about wills and trusts, revocable trust, irrevocable trust, how we use tools like that to help protect against taxes and long-term care expenses and all the rest. And so if you are interested in learning your options and understanding how to put together a really good estate plan, not just the cheapest set of documents out there, check us out, SechlerLawFirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. And we look forward to helping you and your family. So here we are, and it is Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend is the unofficial, they call it the unofficial kickoff of summer. And, you know, my experience around Memorial Day has generally been one of people are having fun, right? I mean, there's baseball tournaments going on. If you got kids, if you got a boat, you're probably on it this weekend. If you got a nice backyard, you're probably doing some grilling in the backyard. And it just happens to, like, we're out of the breakout of colder weather into the warmer, hotter weather. Summer's underway, and we are starting to enjoy that time period of our lives. And it is nice from a relaxation standpoint to have the 3-day weekend right here at this point in time in the year. But I want to chat with you about Memorial Day for a second because it comes out of context. I have as a veteran, as somebody who has served the country overseas, and maybe I'm just a little bit more in tune with this or sensitive to this subject. But one thing that really bugs me is when I hear people say Happy Memorial Day, right? And I know they're not actually saying Happy Memorial Day. Most people aren't actually thinking through what the heck those words would even mean. What they're really saying is happy sunny weather, happy we're having fun today, happy kickoff of summer. But we're not actually saying Happy Memorial Day, right? Because if you say Happy Memorial Day to a family who has lost a veteran, lost somebody to an armed conflict, you're going to realize pretty quick that those are not the right words to be used, right? And I think, you know, it's human nature to try to make good out of bad and all the rest. And you know, people look at Memorial Day as some combination of like the 4th of July and Veterans Day, and we're honoring people and all the rest. But what Memorial Day is honoring fallen soldiers, airmen, Marines, seamen who have lost their lives, right? And there's not all that much happy about that from that family's standpoint. And so be careful with the words Happy Memorial Day. And let's talk about what Memorial Day can be. Memorial Day, we should certainly take some time to just sit in silence, in my opinion, and think about how wonderful it is to live in the country that we live in, despite all the conflict, despite all the arguments, despite all the dysfunction that we have going on right now. We still live in the greatest country in the history of the planet at the greatest time in the history of the planet. And the reason that we have those liberties is because of the sacrifices that um, that our soldiers have made, right? There's a recording that I'd like to recommend. I think I've recommended it on here in years past, by a guy named Jocko Willink. If you're not familiar with who Jocko Willink is, Willink, Jocko is a former Special Forces uh, soldier. He is now a thought leader in leadership space. He's got a couple of books out there taking um, the lessons learned in leading troops in battle to teach leadership principles in the civilian world. And he's got a very popular book called Extreme Ownership, which is one of the best business books I've ever read. I typically read it about once a year, and just on the way that a leader should behave and act. He has a recording that I make my children listen to every Memorial Day weekend. I would encourage you to go Google it, uh, and find it. It is Jocko Willink, and his talk that he gives is called "Remember Me," and the Remember Me talk is him speaking from the voice of a fallen soldier, and what that message might be. And one of the lines in there is, "Remember me this Memorial Day, but don't remember me for me. Remember me for you," so that you take the time to understand how good you have it, to enjoy that freedom isn't free, to enjoy the freedoms that we have living in this country, and that we want to remember me, but not for me, for you, so that you understand that it could be taken and that it's worth sacrificing for. Um, and I make my kids listen to this recording every Memorial Day to provide the context of what this holiday is so that we actually take the time. And I'm not saying we don't enjoy the warm weather this time of year, but we do take the time and talk about what soldiers have and other service members have sacrificed so that our family can enjoy the lifestyle that it has, so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have. And so that's my little message to you is I encourage you this weekend to take that time with yourself, take that time with your family, and recognize what Memorial Day really is. I have this thing that I think is kind of a related conversation in my office. And it it is an old inserviceable, doesn't work, uh 45 Smith and Wesson revolver. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I have this revolver in a case in my office. Um, and this particular revolver means a lot to me. It was a gift to me from my great uncle. Um, And I keep it at work instead of at home for a couple of reasons. It reminds me that on bad days in my air conditioned law firm are not as bad as other bad days. Um, and there's this card in the case. I'm going to read this card to you. This card was prepared by my great uncle, so that it would travel with the revolver when it got to me. Here's what it says: Harry Brothers Miller, of the United States Marine Corps, who happens to be my great grandfather, was with his battalion during World War I, disarming a town in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. He entered a small hut and found a very frail old man lying on a cot. He asked the man if there were any arms in the hut. The man swore there were none. Harry turned to leave the hut. When his back was turned, the old man pulled out his revolver to shoot him. Harry's partner came in another door just in time and shot the old man, saving Harry's life. Um, and Harry apparently decides he's taking home this revolver. It passes down through the family. It ends up with me. And I keep it in my office for a couple of reasons. One, it reminds me at work about the value of teamwork. I don't think I probably have to explain that very much. Had the other guy, the other Marine, not been watching my grandfather's back, I wouldn't be here, right? So the value of teamwork. Um, the other thing that it does, and typically hits me about this time of year, is it reminds me of um, how easy and how frail it is that life can be changed in an instant, right? The old man shoots my great grandfather. My grandparents, don't get married. My mom never exists. I never exist. My children don't exist. And we're talking about one little pull of the trigger. It was the old man, or it was my great grandfather, right? Um, and how fragile this all really is, which obviously as an estate planning attorney is the fragility of life is something that can be top of mind doing what I do. Um, but there's another thing about this is the brotherhood of service members and it doesn't tell all the other stories. It doesn't tell the stories of the guys that didn't make it home. Um, but you know, it also shows me an opportunity that I think that very few people take the time to do. Um, And, I was looking at this morning, thinking about what I was going to talk about on the radio show. And I wanted to get the Memorial Day message across that I think that I got across. Um, but I think the really interesting thing about this piece that I have is not just having it and this kind of neat story about it, but it is that my great uncle, who is now himself deceased, took the time to type out the story on this little card. He didn't just give me the revolver and tell me about it, knowing that I would probably forget the story. He put the story on a little piece of paper that now I will hand to my children or my grandchildren at some point in time in the future. And they will continue to learn lessons from this little artifact the way that I have. Um, and how insightful that was for him to not just hand the thing to me and tell the story, but to take the time to put the story and memorialize it in writing so that it can be passed down. And I want to encourage you to think about if there are stories, artifacts like that, or stories that are important in your family that those stories should be written down. Those stories should be memorialized in some fashion. Those stories can be transferred. When we're in this estate planning space, we write wills and trusts, we write estate planning documents, and those estate planning documents might hand down a piece of personal property like this, or it might transfer financial resources. But one of the things that lawyers have historically not done very well is to help you also plan for the stories, right? Um, I encourage you, we live in this time period where my great uncle wrote that on a sheet of paper. That sheet of paper will eventually turn brown. Between now and then, I am telling the story on a recording today. This recording, in theory, lives forever. Not that I imagine somebody's listening to this radio show in 50 years. But I could type it in an electronic document that could be passed on. Here's the thing, and I'm speaking now to like the baby boomer generation. You live in a time period that in the first time in human history, um, you can record your stories. You can record your stories in a digital format, video on your cell phone or audio on your cell phone. And you can record those stories in a way that they will not get brown, they will not get brittle, they will not fade away. As long as there is electricity, there will be a device from this point forward that can play an MP4 file or an MP3 file, right? It's all digital. We don't need to worry about the VHS tape getting brittle. We don't need to worry about the DVD getting scratched or having a DVD player anymore because everything is on streaming. There will always be a cell phone or some similar device with a screen on it that can play an MP4 file, which is video, an MP3 file, which is audio. Um, and I think back to like the generations before that used a lot of photo albums. You probably don't have a lot of photo albums, maybe from when the kids were little, but most families don't update the photo albums very often after that. Um, in but there are events. Everybody listening to this radio show probably has a couple thousand photos on their phone or videos on their phone. What happens to those things when you pass away? Who's going to tell the story? Who's going to tell the milestone stories of your family, of your own life? Who knows those stories? Um, and why haven't you told anybody? There's this thing out there that like you die twice. You die when you die, and then you die the last time somebody mentions your name. And I'm real curious about Harry. I don't know much about my great grandpa. I don't know. I know this story. This is the one story that I'm aware of that has been preserved so that I can tell you about it today, right? But it's a pretty interesting story. I imagine there were a lot of other interesting stories, but I can't tell them to you today because nobody ever took the time to memorialize them. And just the same way that I am curious about him, I suggest to you that your family members will also be curious about you. And if you have family members that are senior to you, aren't you going to be curious about them? Um, and if so, why aren't we recording these stories? Um, there's another personal family story I'd like to share with you. My father-in-law passed away way too young. Um, and he's been gone a while now. And back in the day, when he was sick, he was terminal with cancer, so he knew he was dying. We knew he was dying. And I had a BlackBerry phone. I don't know if you remember BlackBerry phones, but it had this little rolly ball on it. And it was like one of the first smartphones out there. It did not have a touch screen. It had like a keypad. But I had a BlackBerry. And it had an audio recording feature to it. You could record audio. And one day when my father-in-law was sick and he was in his hospice bed, I walked into the hospice room and he was uh he was telling a story to my wife, his daughter. And it just occurred to me, I don't know why, I don't know, but it occurred to me that this will be the last time he tells this story. And I don't know why it occurred to me, but I pulled out my BlackBerry, I opened it up, and I hit the record button, and I put it on the bed, and I recorded him for a while telling these stories about his childhood. And time went on, he passed, time went on, and I forgot about it. And then one week, years later, probably 6, 7 years later, um, my little kids, whom he never met, are running around and they're playing with my BlackBerry like it's a phone, right? It's not my phone anymore by this point. It's just the device that is not charged, but they have a phone and they're playing with it. And as soon as I saw it, I just remembered like there's that recording is on the phone. And we were able to find a charger for it. We were able to break in. Finding the password to an old cell phone that I had forgotten was another story, but we got the thing open. And I told my wife, you're gonna probably want to sit down. And I played this story. I played this recording. And of course, it was an emotional experience for her. But then it was, I mean, it was happy stories, though. He was telling stories from his childhood. And I played them for my children, his grandchildren, who never met him. And it just spurred all these questions. What was he like? And what kind of foods did he like? And was he nice? And would he play with me? And all these stories that my innocent little children were asking about the grandpa. And man, I'm glad I recorded those stories. It's a little digital asset that's probably one of my most cherished possessions. As much as I've cherished this physical object, this revolver I've been talking about, I cherish this digital recording that I have of my father-in-law telling stories from his childhood. And I encourage you that if you got a senior in your life, if you got a parent in your life, to get the stories. And it's not hard. My mom and I were on a road trip and we were on vacation together. And it was like just me and her getting away for a while. And it was planned out ahead of time. So I got smart and we were going to spend hours and hours in the car together. And so I got this little device. And I put my cell phone on it and hit record and started driving. And so I got my cell phone recording us sitting on the dashboard of the car for our multiple hour drive. And I just started asking her questions. I started asking her questions about her childhood and where did she grow up. I started asking her questions about her siblings and what they were like, one of whom is deceased. What was she like? I didn't really have a relationship with her as an adult. Tell me what you remember about your father, because my grandpa died when my mom was 12, and of course I never met him. And so I just started asking all of these questions, and I learned so much about my mom that I didn't know before. And it was wonderful having the conversation. It was wonderful hearing the stories. But it's also wonderful now that I have that recorded. I've got this video of me talking to my mom about her upbringing and about her career and about her education and about her interests and about about me when I was a kid, and just her perspective on all this. Um, and I encourage you to take the time to do this. And it's awkward, right? I mean, you sit down, you press record, and mom, tell me some stories, right? You got to become like a little mini journalist in a way and just kind of ask some questions. Did you tell me about your sibling? How did you guys share a bedroom? What was the name of the street you grew up on? And just ask some questions that will naturally turn into a conversation. Record that conversation, because just like I am happy that I have this story of my father-in-law telling his childhood, just like I'm happy I've got this written down story about my great grandpa and this revolver that could have ended all of it and would have rendered me as though I never were. Um, I think this stuff matters. I think that the stories matter as much about is matter as much to your family as the money, right? Your life and what you've accomplished is interesting. But you know the stories better than anyone else. And you live in a time period where, for the first time in human history, you can tell that story, and it's not going to get brittle, and it's not going to get old, and it's not going to fade away. You can tell that story, and your great 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 grandkids can understand those stories. They're going to be able to watch them. And I don't want you to miss that opportunity. I think what I'm talking about is going to be commonplace in a few years. And I don't want you to miss it. I don't want your kids to miss out on having these cherished possessions, because it matters. This is one of the things, like we run this workshop for our clients. My wife, the story that I just shared about the BlackBerry and all that. My wife teaches a class to our clients. So we after we work with our clients, we continue to have a relationship with our estate planning clients. We can amend documents in the future, and we provide monthly education sessions. One month it may be taxes, and one month it may be insurance, and it's either estate planning or something that's kind of tangentially related to estate planning, something that is important that might just help you. And we do these education events for existing clients. And a couple times a year, my wife does an event and encourages people to take in and do the storytelling. Right? All right, now here's some lessons. Here's some ways you can get it done. Now go out in the hallway and actually record some stories. Right? Go record your first story. The first one's the hardest one, because it's awkward getting your cell phone out and just recording a story the first time. But once you've done it, and once you've done 3, and once you've done 5, and once you've done 10, now it's like you can start to think about it. Well, let's tell stories about every house that I've ever lived in, and let's tell stories about every car that I've ever lived in, and how my education was, and where did I go to school, and where was my first job, and you can just think through sort of like your life stories, and sort of tell these stories chapter by chapter. And what you'll have when you're done is like a couple of hours of video that you don't need to record hours at a time. A couple hours of video, 2 minutes at a time. But you've got this library now of videos of your life story that now we can put it into a digital format where if you pass away, your kids will get it, your grandkids will get it, and those stories will live on. And I think that this stuff matters, and it doesn't just matter for you, right? I'm not talking about your ego being satisfied by getting to tell a story. I'm talking about the value that this gift is. Your family cares. Your kids want to know the stories. And it is a beautiful gift for you to share those stories with them, so that when they are remembering you later, they have this thing that they can go to. They can watch it with the next generation. They can talk about it. They can love it. They can love you long after you're gone. So I want you to think about doing something like that. We can obviously help you with it. It's a thing that we do. But don't forget to tell those stories, people. And please also remember, I got to wrap up the show. It's not Happy Memorial Day. Take the time to celebrate our fallen heroes, recognize what they did, and recognize what they sacrificed so that you can have what you have. But let's not say Happy Memorial Day. All right. Okay. Thanks for listening this week. And I hope to check you here next week.